welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be changing out the front brake pad, so I thought I'll walk you through it. Given that changing out brake pads are the same whether you're doing the front left, right, or the rear right, left, is the exact same procedure. I'm only going to show you one because you're going to duplicate that on the other three. So what you'll need to do is, of course, jack up your tire, put a jack stand, jack up your car, put a jack stand beneath it, and then you want to take off your tire, of course, and you want to this is your master cylinder, you want to take the cap off, because what will happen is when you are doing this, you're going to need to compress the piston on the caliper, and that's going to make the fluid rise up in here. So you want to have this off as that fluid rise. Okay. All right, and the tools you'll need is pretty basic on here. I have a C-clamp for compressing the piston on the brake caliper. There's tools to use to do that too as well, but I find this to be pretty straightforward, and plus I got plenty of C-clamps. 14 millimeter. I use the ratchet style, makes it quicker. And a flathead, which may or may not come in handy. And this right here stuff is the absolute best stuff for lubing up everything. It lasts the entire time of your brake pads are on there. It won't dry out where you end up having your pistons, where you end up having your guide pin seizing inside your caliper bracket, and then having to replace all of that out because they're seized together. So this right here helps to prevent this. There's cheap things out there that you can use, but this stuff is way better. It costs a bit more, but it saves you a ton of money in the end. And in regards to your brake pads, what I always suggest is to do ceramic brake pads. You can get the cheaper ones, the organic ones, but you're gonna have brake dust all over your rotors, and they wear down quicker too as well. All right, the first thing we're gonna wanna do is remove the caliper. And the best way to do it first is to try to compress the piston that's inside of here down as much as possible to help relax the brake pads off of your rotors. One of the ways you can do it is just take your screwdriver, stick it up in here. There's a slot over here on the other side, and you can use that, stick it in there. And what you're doing is pressing up against this rotor here. I got it in between one of these lines over up in here. I'm pulling it this way towards me, so it's pushing it back. The pistons are on the back side of this caliper, and so when I'm pulling this down this way, what it's doing is pushing those calipers, those pistons back inside of the caliper, giving you more room to help take this off. All right, and when you're doing that, when that piston is going back inside of the caliper, it's pushing the fluid through the lines back up into where I showed you, which was the master cylinder. And so if your master cylinder is already kind of full of fluid, it may start to overflow. So you may want to keep an eye on it, and may need to siphon a little bit of that fluid out so it doesn't overflow out of there. So now once we got this part done, what we want to do is we want to take our 14 millimeter and put it on here. Let me just check, make sure you guys have a good view back there. All right, and loosen up each one of them. Shouldn't take much. If it does, that means somebody probably over torqued them. All right, and it's just two. All right, 2 14 millimeters. There we go, right there. And because once you break them, they should just come out by hand. All right, and there's the second one. At that point, sometimes you're able to just grab it and it comes off. If not, you'll just take your flathead and put it in there and use that to help as leverage to work it out of there, either from the top or from the bottom. You know, you see that? So, again, sometimes if you compress the piston back far enough, it may just come right out. And there we go. Those are the pistons I was referring to, if you can see them. The 2 pistons, and so they're still sticking out some, so we're going to press those back even further because your new brake pads will be thicker than the old ones. So in order to be able to accommodate that extra thickness, you want these pistons to be pushed all the way back in there. So what we'll do is, what you should do to make sure, because you don't want to risk damaging your hose while you're doing other things, you may want to just string this up with a bungee cord or something. So I want to show you that, but for me, I'm just going to set it off to the side up here for now. Now that isn't recommended, because if it falls, then it could damage the hose. So now you want to take your brake pads off, and they're in little slots down there. You just slide them out like there. There it is. And then you do one for the other side as well, for the back side. And it should just come right on out. And next, what we want to do, we're going to want to put the rotor, the brake pads back in here. And remember, these are the feet right here. So you probably imagine these are your new ones. What you want to do is, you get your feet here, we already greased up in there at the bottom part. But I would like to do, as you can see, this represents the front one. And where you see it's not painted, because I painted them while they were on here. But even if it wasn't painted, you'll be able to see where your brake caliper rests on these. It would be those areas there. So since those touched by the caliper and could create areas where it will squeak, I like to put some of this on in those areas there. So as it's pressing against there, it helps prevent any squeaking from happening when you're braking. And you set it down in there. And push it up against there. All right. And you're going to do the same with the back one. The reason I know this is the back one, of course, new ones you wouldn't see that, is that, well, on your back one, you got this right here is your early warning detector. You see that right there? So as you can see, I still got some time left on the back hand, but once it gets low enough where this right here will actually touch the rotor, you will actually start hearing a squeal or a squeak. That's letting you know your brake pads are low and it's time to change them. So I'm going to put some in the two areas where the pistons touched on here, where it touches on here. That way when it's pressed up against there, I don't have to worry about against any squeaking noises. There we go. Get my fingers up. And now the next step would be to put the rotor on. Put the brake caliper on. And remember, you're putting new pads on, they're thicker. So to accommodate that thickness, we need to push the rotor back up in there. All right, the rotor. We need to push the pistons back up in there. See how far they stick out? So remember, we took the cap off of the master cylinder. If your fluid level is pretty high, when we push this back in, it's going to push that fluid level up and possibly overflow it. So be prepared to need to suction some of that out if that's the case. So what I usually just take I just take one of the old brake pads, set it up in here against there as such. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me take a look. Yeah, let me pull it you guys a little closer, okay? All right, so I just take one of the old brake pads, put it on there. And then I take my C-clamp. This is an old used C-clamp. Don't go out and buy, well, you can buy a new one, they don't cost anything. Open it up high enough, far enough. Put it on there. You see one end on this end, the other end there. So it's going to press this brake pad against the pistons and force them back down in there. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. And remember, keep an eye on your bottle to make sure you don't overflow. All right, so that's it back all the way up in there. Now you can back it off. Take that out. And now you see the piston is nice and flush with there. Put my used one back in there. And now I'm going to take my caliper. Make sure when you do it that you don't twist this, you know, when you're moving around sometimes you can end up twisting it. Make sure it's not like that, the hose that is. And you can just set it back on there, and you can push these guide pins in to give the clearance needed to let this drop back down in place. And you take your screws, your bolts that is, and just bolt them back in. And I'm gonna get my 14mm and tighten them. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this part or not. Let me see if I can zoom you in. Oh, you're pretty well up in there, but you may not be able to see it. When you're turning the bolt, this part right here may actually turn too as well. So you may need to put a open end on that to hold that while you tighten up your. And sometimes just putting your finger on there is more than enough, because once you get enough grip, it does the rest on its own, like that. All right. One thing to note, after you change your brake pads, when you first get in your car, start her up, push on the brake pedal, it will go to the floor. That's because you push that piston all the way in, and so now when you press on the brake pedal, that piston is going to start to move out. So you're going to probably press on it. You're going to after you start the car up, press the pedal all the way to the floor like it will go to, and that's normal. Let back up, press down again. After about 2, 3, maybe even 4 press downs, you'll get full pressure back. All right, so I just want to make sure you expect that. And that is how you change the front brake pads on a Cadillac CTS. Hopefully it helped you out. Please hit the like button and definitely hit that subscribe button. That way you can have access to all my other YouTube videos out there working on my Cadillac CTS that may help you out with yours. Thanks a lot for joining.